Welcome back to the Sam Acho podcast featuring Clif Marshall. We have a very, very special guest today. His name is Tim Estes, and I'm actually going to read a little bit of his bio because he's actually in a world that I think a lot of you all might be interested in. So Tim Estes is a pioneering executive in the artificial intelligence and natural language processing domain. He founded and led Digital Reasoning from 2000. An AI leader in the space of unstructured data analytics for 20 plus years, Estes envisioned a means by which computers could learn to accurately interpret language, understand context, and extract critical intelligence. As you can see, we're going to have a conversation about AI. But this conversation is a little bit different. So since Tim's time at Digital Reasoning, he actually started a company called AngelAI. And specifically, I think we're going to talk about here is this app called AngelQ. It's an app for kids ages 5 to 12 that protects them from some of the online, I'll call it predators, if you will. And Tim, you can even get in deeper that we see sometimes as we're browsing or on social media or even some AI generated information. And so without further ado, Tim, we're so glad to have you.
Sam, Clif, thanks for having me on. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, we're excited. And Clif, I know Clif, Clif and I were talking beforehand, and as soon as Clif heard we could have you on the podcast, it's like, dude, let's get it scheduled because I've got some questions. Clif is a father as well. I'm a father. Tim, you're a dad. On this podcast, we talk about faith, talk about family, talk about football, talk about finance. We try to go first, try to give space. We try to grow hope. And so this podcast is really critical to a lot of the topics. So Clif, I'll let you go first as we start our conversation with Tim.
Yeah, Tim, I'm so fired up again to have you on the show. I guess, Sam just mentioned it. We talk on this podcast often about football, finances, faith. But today we're really going to hone in on the family because I have 2 kids, right? Sam is a father of 4. And Tim, I know you are a father of 2. And so I just see my kids, a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, and the interaction they have each and every day on the World Wide Web, the internet. And so I want to know, number one, about your family, and then number 2, about how this AngelAI company was started, and if your kids, how they would be affected by it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. And so, yeah, I'll probably share more here than I have in some other places. I because of knowing some of the threats that are out there, I'm fairly careful with what we talk about with our kids. You probably have similar kind of, guidelines, y'all. You want to be open and transparent with people and audience, but we also have a first obligation to protect our families, right? And so, So we're always figuring that out. So I've got 2 boys, 9 and 6. And a lovely bride of 10 years. And I think that where to begin in this? I've been in this area for a long time. I started my first company when I was 20 years old. So I was a 3rd year at UVA. And I went on this journey where I got put in the weirdest places, from like classified, facilities, and going and finding terrorists with AI in the early 2000s, then going onto Wall Street, these like global banks like Goldman Sachs and others, and finding bad guys there. And so I spent about 20 years going through finding all these bad guys on different areas, and then occasionally some really good things, like using it to find like patients for like potential cancer patients for HCA, like at scale, so as to find like grandparents and that might be sick and get to them sooner. So I spent a lot of time on that, and in that journey, I got exposed to one particular effort called it was a group called Thorn. It's based out of Los Angeles. It's, Ashton Kutcher, Demi Moore's charity, and they focused on sexual exploitation of children online. And the stories they told me, so this is all happening before I'm a parent, right? So, it's one of those things, we all have lived through the journey, all of us multiple times. You're one kind of man, and one kind of believer before you have a family, and then you're a different kind of one on the other side. There is no better force to bring about humility, I think, that God intended, than to give us kids. Because you feel like the limits of your power in influencing that. They have these independent people that they can be little people, but they're their own people. and we get to kind of nudge them along, and we get to watch over them, and that's stewardship. But at the same time, you also feel a little powerless. Like you can't control it. If you try to control it fully, try to shape it fully, you end up running into various limitations that are human and walls. And there's a big bad world out there. I mean, there's a lot of goodness in the world, right? But there's a lot of badness. But that Thorn experience, I brought it up and I walked my story to that point because they came telling us about all these children that were being essentially trafficked for sex, like sold online. And so, like Sam had shared this amazing Tim Tebow clip with me, in the last week or so, where he was on Sean Ryan's show and just laid out how really horrifically endemic, like sexual material on children is spread over the internet and actively. Well, we were exposed by Thorn, who had done the work, and interviewed survivors, to all these kids that had been advertised as escorts online. We're talking like 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds on the open internet. There's a place called Backpage. You could get to it. You could get to somebody's ad and call their pimp 2 clicks from Google. Okay. Wow. And it was out there for a decade, like doing nothing but evil. And we actually worked with them to find, to build a system that would go pull all those ads and figure out which one were the kids. Because you got, escorts on there, which is still illegal, still wrong, but it's adults. And you got these children. And these children are the ones that are being like, it's one of the most egregious evils in the face of this earth to do that to children. And so we got exposed to like how bad that was. And we built a system that literally crawled all those ads. And we had like 100 million of them. I know that sounds insane. That we literally had an index of 100 million escort ads, probably 1 million or 2 that were unique, and then, copies upon copies of others. And I think we estimate one with like 6% were actually kids. And so just think about the math of that, of what that means in terms of how many kids were being sold and trafficked 2 clicks from Google. Okay. So I come up before I'm a dad, right, with this kind of evil like in my face. And we're working with law enforcement. We're trying to like help them find these kids and take them down. And Thorn is the one that deserves the credit. It was Thorn, gave us the resources to build the system. They had the vision for it. We were just the technical guys who could figure out how to build out parts of it. And so then I become a dad. And, you're naturally going to be concerned about, okay, this is what can happen to your kid. Don't leave them too far out of your sight on vacation. That type of feeling we all have. And so this AngelQ piece emerged as a second company. I finished up the first one in 2020 and kind of wrapped up in 21 with the acquirer. In 22, I came across this story of a little girl named Nyla Anderson. And so Nyla is a 10-year-old, girl, went to charter school, spoke 3 languages, really smart, and was just on TikTok, watching dance videos, because it was just silly dance videos, like silly singing, whatever, right? That was all in the pandemic. All the kids were doing it. Everybody was being cool about it. And this algorithm served up a video to this little girl called a blackout challenge. And she never looked for it. So this is something where the technology decided it was going to put something in front of this little girl because it knew that this negative, like crazy stuff would get her eyeballs and they could make money off of it. So the sweet girl goes into her mother's closet, hangs herself by her mother's purse by the neck, like emulating this, and suffocates herself. Her mother, Tawana, comes home and finds her and takes her to the hospital, dies 5 days later. And that got to me. I say this in a couple of contexts. That Thorn thing they came in originally in 2012. So this is like 10 years before this. So 10 years earlier, I had a moment of like, this is evil, not in my country kind of moment. Like, do something about it. And then this happens as soon as I get done with my last company. And I'm like, this is evil, not in my country. Do something about it. And so I was like, this can't be allowed to happen. And also when you're a parent, I mean, I'm sure you all can identify with this, which is like something bad happens to somebody else's kid. We don't go, oh, well, that's just too bad. We think about what happens if it was our kid. Okay. Mm-hmm. God gives us this empathy of encountering like suffering and having love for other, like our own close things to help us open up our hearts to other people. Right. And so part of this is you encounter something that bad and it hits you. It's like, this could be like my 9-year-old boy. Like he might be overconfident and watch something like this if he was allowed on that stuff. And then that might be what I came home to. Right. So that stuck with me. And I think that what we what we have this opportunity to do, in this life is to like take those moments and let it activate us, because change is hard. Like affecting something as big as like, TikTok and all these kids exposed to social media, huge problem, truly Goliath, scale problem. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know where you're going to take me with this, but I want to put an AI between every child on the internet and give that over to the parents so they can know that something that's kind of working on their behalf isn't doing their job for them, but takes parenting online. And that's where AngelQ comes in. As we thought of, okay, we could build something that would be an AI that would serve the family, and it would be a way for kids to search and be curious, but be 100% safe. And that's kind of where that goes. So long journey, 25 years I've tried to compress in the last maybe 3 or 4 minutes of that. But that's what got me here. And a little bit about like maybe me and my family and the things that actually drive us.
Tim, just to follow up on that conversation, you talked about a couple of those like high mark moments, those are steps that are etched in your memory. What was the process like of actually starting AngelQ?
Well, so it's very different the second time around, right? And so this was my second go at it. I had done decently for my last company, so I didn't come in kind of cold. I didn't come in completely unresourced. And so what happened was I heard that story and I started thinking about what would that look like? What would that AI that could be between the kids and the internet look like? And I went to the people I knew, one of the smartest guys who had ever worked for me in my last company, a guy named Brian, who became the CTO and is the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer for AngelQ. And he and I started like iterating and talking about how it might work. And then I shared also with a woman named Randy, who's my Chief Marketing Officer. She was the best mind I knew about how to reach people, build a brand, because it became clear to me that if we're going to succeed, we needed to think about how parents would perceive what we were building. Like AI could be very scary. Like how can you turn it into a positive tool for the parents? Like what are the values you have to have like imbued in that system and in your brand to make that stick? And Randy was the best brand mind I've ever had. And so she became my Chief Marketing Officer. And so what you do is you go through and you find the right people. And then the last one was just fascinating, is someone I went to high school with. That I didn't know that well, but I had immense respect for a guy named Josh Thurman. And Josh, he amazing story. He'd gone to Wake Forest. 9/11 happens, and he decides he's going to go become a Navy SEAL. Not an easy thing to go just decide on a whim, because he was actually going to like Yale Divinity School. So he had like he's going to med school or Yale Divinity School, and then he ends up going being a Navy SEAL. And not only being Navy SEAL, he ends up in Team 6. So he ends up like on the real deal for 12, 13 years. And so I'd heard about him, and I knew, like I said, knew him from when I was younger. We had some friends that were in common. I was not a great athlete by any means when I was in high school. He was an amazing cross country athlete. And, we had a lot of friends from that because I was like the cross country water boy basically back in those days. And so I knew him in respect, but I just honestly, so true story. I was at my oldest kid's school, meeting with the headmaster, just normal check-in. They bring the parents in once a year and like give you just some feedback on it, whatever, all good stuff. And it somehow came out that Josh was actually the roommate of the headmaster in college. And I had no better way to say it. It was almost like, it was almost like from above. It was like, Tim, you need to go talk to Josh. And so I just randomly, I hadn't talked to him. I met him briefly in 2018. Hadn't talked to him since. When he got out of the service, he went and met with me when I ran my last company. Had a good rapport, but like I hadn't talked to him at this point like 4 years. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to build this thing. You have all this track record of execution, operational excellence, where the highest things were on the line. I think you could be an amazing operating partner with this. And took him. He was actually involved in another company he helped found, so I kind of had to recruit him out of that. But he found he basically went ahead and made that call. He's been an amazing partner, just like my other two founders with this. So I think if I was going to give you the baseline, you got to get your core team first. Like your team and who you work with is everything. And so that was where I spent the first year. Then you got the people, so 2023 was the initial investment, figuring out a little bit of the product, talking to a lot of people who didn't invest in it, because you're going to get 20 no's for every one yes. Maybe you might get 100 no's for every one yes. It doesn't matter if, okay, so last went around, I raised $100 million in my last company and created kind of the standard for compliance and surveillance in the top tier banks. So I had decent track record from my last go around. Doesn't necessarily matter, because this go around is different, right? Like, you're building an app for kids. Like, if you went and built something for Goldman Sachs, we'd probably fund that again. That's kind of how the attitude goes. So people aren't necessarily motivated by, oh, this mission needs to get solved. It's, you're probably making a lot of money is good, right? And so we had to search and find the kind of people who believed. And interestingly enough, my initial investors were people that had been investors in my last company. They just decided, we know you. We've worked with you for 20 years. We're in. And these are people I didn't ask to invest. They sort of said, yep, we went in. And then so what I also say is, when you're building something new, it's almost certain that the first people to back you, they just love you. I mean, they kind of will back you in whatever. And so your character, what you bring into that, your track record, creates that opportunity. So yeah, I think that, getting the team together, cooking up the idea in a way that's thoughtful, and getting it together, finding the people that basically will invest with love initially, and then getting far enough, showing enough profit or progress that, maybe new people you didn't know jump in, which is what happened for me in 24. So we started to get some really serious investor. We got Reid Hoffman's seed fund Village got into it, which was awesome. Jeremy Achin, who built Data Robot, a multi-billion-dollar AI company, his fund invested. Jeremy's on the board with me. He's been an outstanding investor. And then we had this really awesome group that kind of came in at the end called Magnify, which is tied in with Melinda French Gates and the Pivotal Ventures and stuff. And the Magnify, the two amazing women that run that, I mean, they're all about fantech. They're literally probably one of the shrewdest, not the shrewdest seed fantech investors in the country. And we're lucky that our investors just happened to run into them. And then we fit kind of the mission they wanted to be on. So we end up with, 3 funds that cared about mission, deeply connected, giving us the runway to build this. And, a year later, we built it, we shipped it, and now we're going to take it to the next level. So yeah, but it's always building. It's building on the trust of other people to sign up and be on your team. The work with that team to figure out what it is really. Like, what do you think it is? It's going to change. It iterates. Then the people that love you have to kind of pull the trigger probably to give you the resources to even take a shot at it. And you got to make the most of that shot, because that's what gets you to the next milestone of, we get the backing to do something real. And that's kind of been the journey for the last 2.5 years with AngelQ.
Tim, I wanted to just quickly read the mission, or part of the mission statement that you have for Angel, just so people get a great understanding of what this is and how important it is. And just hearing your story, I have a ton of respect for you, because there's a problem, right? Mm-hmm. And that problem is online, and that problem is algorithms and exploitation, and just dangerous to children throughout our world. But part of your mission statement, it says, an AI that cares because its objective function is to improve and protect a child's wellness. One that will do everything in support of them, look out for their mental, social, and emotional well-being, know them better than anyone, but never sell or exploit that knowledge. Partner with parents to make sure their child is protected and enriched, and AI to bring families together in ways both online and offline, every day, all the time, to make a lot of healthier and happier humans. That's the mission behind AngelQ. Tim, I want to ask you, what does success look like for this company 10, 15, 20 years from now?
Ooh, that's a big one. It's one of the challenges when you're running something is, my mom used to say this, life is so daily. And so you get focused in on the urgent, there's the urgent and there's the important, right? So I love the questions is going to make me think of important for a change. Not every day you get a chance to think of the important stuff. So I believe that the last 20 years of technology have kind of gone backwards. Okay. So technology, the fundamental purpose of technology is to make us more productive and to augment ourselves, to create kind of an augmentation of ourselves, productive, healthier, wealthier, all this goodness. That's the history of civilization and technology. Something weird happened, between like 2005, 2010, where the number one applications, the killer apps of the internet, search and then social. What happened was they went from being useful, like initially search was find stuff, right, that you needed to find because there's all this stuff out there. And social was find the people you need to find and learn what's going on with them. Those are the two killer apps. They started using that killer app to then hack people's brains. And this is not speculative. Sean Parker, one of the co-founders of Facebook, ran it with Mark Zuckerberg early on. He was at a conference in 2017 at Stanford and basically said, that their whole purpose was they were hacking the human mind, and they had thought through like what it was going to do. And then he said verbatim, like, God only knows what this is doing to our children. Okay. So I give you that kind of anchor point, right? We have 20 years where they turned technology from being a tool into a destination. And the destination is you're hooked on it because they basically use digital narcotics. Okay. They come up with ways to fire off dopamine, like by, not knowing if you've had someone thumbs up you yet or not knowing what's going to pop up next in the feed. There's all these little tricks they're doing all the time. There's a science behind those tricks that makes people need that hit over and over again. So it works very similar to addictive narcotics. And what's interesting is, and one of my good friends, Claire Morrell, she has a great book called The Tech X that's coming out in about probably in like 2 weeks here, I think next week. She makes a great point in her book, which is real relationship tends to require physical engagement, oxytocin. It's why, frankly, you hug your wife and you feel something. It's like that, or your kids for that matter. The virtual cannot replace that. It can wire our brains like to want something else and think it replaces it, but it's actually a false thing. Okay. So I know you asked me one question. I needed to build up to this. Okay. I want to undo as much of that as possible. In 20 years, my hope is that the world we have today where kids are walking around looking down at their phone, but I do think it's metaphorically interesting. They're looking down, not up. Okay. So I want a world where Gen Alpha and the generation that comes after that, it is lame and uncool to be on your technology that much. Why? Because that means the technology is dumb. It's not useful. It's not productive. I want a world where they're on a screen 20 minutes a day because that's what it takes to talk to their AI, and their AI goes and does all this stuff for them and comes back and actually values human time. All right. See, the technology is actually there for it to be built that way, to do all this stuff for us, to do things that would take us weeks and get done in minutes now. Like that tech is the revolution the last 2 or 3 years. All right. If that was designed in a way that wasn't about trapping people's attention and trying to hook them into being, in what universe is it actually healthy for kids to be looking at a screen 8 hours a day? That's not childhood. That's not even life. And so I believe that to change that vector, you got to start kids early and young, which is why AngelQ we're focused on this sort of 5 to 12-year-old early piece. And it's really about giving the kids the ability to explore safely. But there's nothing we built in this thing to keep them like going in. They have to have the drive. You watch a video on AngelQ and it just stops. It doesn't take you anywhere. Why? Because we think if you watch a video after you search for it, basically, before you watch another one, you should decide. You should stop, pause, and decide, is that what I want to do next? Go spend 20 minutes watching something else. And it's amazing. If you don't trick them into doing it, just keep watching, most time the kids will just check out. They'll be like, yeah, I think, I'm just going to do something else. It isn't interesting enough for them because they know there's something better. So I think that, my dream is we have tens, hundreds of millions of kids that are on AngelQ or derivative of that they trust as an AI, but not because it's their friend, not because it's their companion. We'll be super clear. There's some really dangerous stuff going on out there with people trying to turn AI into companions right now and being like a substitute for relationships. And that is not a road we're going down. we do want it to be, we want it to be your C3PO and your R2D2. We want it to be the thing that's, kind of cute, kind of fun, and maybe you think well of it, but it really is not there like to replace your human relationships. It's there to free your time up so you can have more real relationships.
Tim, I want to follow up on that. I think two things are kind of my mind. You talked about how with AngelQ, it gives children the decision, do I want to watch again? I think about some of the other apps that we use, that other people use, and it's like as soon as the show ends, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the next show is already up. Mm-hmm. And you think, and to your point, it's not an accident. That's by design, right?
Yep.
So I think about that, but also following up on Clif's question of what does success look like in 15 years? My follow-up is, what would hinder you and AngelQ from being successful?
I mean, so there's the stuff that normally, you've got to deal with as a company. So you've got to keep having the funding to build out and to keep essentially expanding. I mean, so we run on just Mac stuff right now, right? On iOS, we run on like iPhones and iPads. We got to go get this thing on Android. We got to find clever ways to put it on TV top boxes. We have to do that kind of work, and that's going to take time and resources. So there's the kind of stuff like that. There's find the best people to do that. These are all the things that just build business. There's a couple of things that are not just related to building a business that are specific to AngelQ that could stop us. Two ones in particular. One is, I don't think the thing we're trying to pull off works without the parents being a partner. I think a parent has to decide that, a way to think about is this is, if your kid is staring at, a device that you've given them, and there are, 4 or 5 super addictive apps and games, and you're giving them the freedom to use their time however they want, it's almost like you take them out to a restaurant and you don't make them have to eat dinner first. You just say, pick what's on the menu. And they go straight to desserts. Like parenting is not that, right? Parenting is knowing that, if a kid had the freedom to choose their way forward, they'd probably eat Skittles every night. Okay. Especially younger ones. Until they had a belly ache, and maybe they pick a different kind of candy thinking that's it before they finally give up on the sweets because it makes them sick. So like that's normal kid behavior, right? We as parents intervene all the time and nudge them better for their own good. And they grow up and they start respecting that. And they start understanding that. They start growing in their own maturity. We're trying to do that digitally, right? We're trying to do that in the digital space. And what that means is we need to partner with parents in that, okay, probably if you've got AngelQ, you don't need YouTube on there anymore. And so keeping YouTube like on your actual device, like the kid's device where they can get access to it, it's just asking for trouble because it's just rabbit holes left and right. I mean, you mentioned about the autoplay, like that's not great. What's really bad is when the autoplay is something weird that shows up right after what they were watching, that the algorithm has decided is related to it, but it's like nothing like what you would want them to watch. And so, or there's a comment because it is kind of a social network, and the comment might, drag them down some rabbit hole. So the world we have today, since it's all monetized based on attention, these different apps are all monetized based on attention. They're going to want your kid to go down as many rabbit holes as possible because that means they're down the hole and they're not getting out, right? So they're not going to protect your kid from going down these rabbit holes. So that means that part of the parenting process is, substantial limits probably on the stuff around AngelQ, and treating it like, at best, treating it like dessert, like games. Okay. Yeah. I grew up playing some video games too. I didn't spend all my time doing it, but, I don't think I ended up totally, antisocial because of it. So I think there's a lot of like legitimate, playing, and there's a lot of people that are, in fact, probably 1 or 2 people on this podcast, Sam, have actually been characters in games, is my guess. And so given the pro history, and so I think that's some way that kids like love and follow people and do it. So I think it's legit. But, if a kid's going to spend 8 hours a day on Madden, I mean, that's probably not great either, right? So there's got to be these boundaries. And I think that we have to work with parents who have had enough, don't want their kids to be addicted to these things, and don't want to have their kids be dysregulated. And AngelQ becomes kind of a safe go-to option. So, they don't need to go do research on Google without you there. They could go down and do the research with AngelQ. If they're going to use those other tools, it's probably to do it with them. It's probably taking the effort to say, okay, you want to see some on YouTube, you can't get on Angel. We'll do that together. Okay. You want to go search on Google and try to dig into something for whatever reason, because like what AngelQ is giving you isn't enough yet. And by the way, every month or two, we're going to be expanding that. So our hope is that that thing where it doesn't do it is going to get smaller and smaller. But our goal would be that we become the safe option when the parent can't be present. And that requires the parent to sort of, I mean, it should be a good thing. They can say yes to it, right? Without the risk. But on the other hand, if they just let it be anything goes because you're just trying to buy space as a parent and let anything go, that's a hard thing for us to succeed in. Because like I said, we're then up against people that are actively trying to addict your children to technology so they can make money. And we're actively trying not to. You know, those are called dark patterns. Like if you dig into the literature about this stuff, like endless scroll, right? Endless scroll is known as a dark pattern. It's because they figured out that if your brain was not given any natural place to stop, it would just keep going and it would flush out what you just read from your memory before you got to the next thing. And by that happening, what happens is you would lose the impulse control and you'd spend 45 minutes on a social media thing when you naturally spend 5. Okay. And they figured this out. Asa Raskin figured it out. And he's kind of been repenting of it ever since. He went and is now part of this group called the Center for Humane Technology with Tristan Harris. And they're the ones that did The Social Dilemma, that movie on Netflix. And they cracked us. They kind of said, this is why it's all bad. And they're called dark patterns. We've tried an Angel to put light patterns in, you know, natural stopping points, natural places for kids' judgment to come out and decide they want to do more. We're going to keep improving that, trying to nudge kids off the app to do things offline. Like the big priority for us in the near future is the best stories we're getting from parents. I mean, there's great stories from parents that have had big insights and great insights for their kids, but there's also great stories of them going and doing things together. You know, we had one parent that ended up like going out and they adopted a family, you know, pet as a result of the investigation they had done on Angel to pick out what kind of pet. And now there's a memory of that.
No, Tim, this is super helpful. You talk about the parents' involvement. So a lot of people don't know. I got a chance to test out Angel early. I got a chance to use Angel for my family, for my kids, and to your point, there's this ease of use. Kids can go in and you have this conversation with this AI, it's like, hey, I want to watch this video, I want to watch that video, and it would show it. And it's great. It's like the safe place. But the best part about Angel for me so far has been the parent involvement. What do I mean by that? There's technology within the app that actually essentially allows parents, yes, to be able to control screen time, but more so for me, it lets you know a little bit of what your child has been searching, what they've been asking about, the conversations they've been having online. And now 4 kids, and one of them, it's been a challenge at the school, and I saw the Angel report for the day, and it said, man, your child, he loves to learn, really inquisitive and wants to grow. And we noticed that by the question of he asked is how do I get smart? How do I get smart? Mm-hmm. And that question provided a lot of insight for me because, as you know, whether you're at school or even at home, there are conversations that are happening that you may know about or may not know about. And for me, it was this reminder of, oh man, let me remind my child of who they are so that the world on the outside, whether it's friends at school or maybe stuff that he's searching, doesn't make him think that he is what he isn't. And so one of the biggest benefits for me, talking about the parent involvement, is this insight. I think it's actually called Angel Insights. It's
Angel Insights. It's a weekly kind of digest with a summary of what your kid's interested in, and then also kind of some suggestions around it. And so what it did for you, Sam, is what we dreamed it would do. It's basically something to bring parents and their kids closer together. It's interesting. Those insights are not things we're ever using, like relative to your child. Like there's never an advertisement. There's never information going anywhere. The AI's learning about your child is actually just to supply you so that it can be something that helps you make that outreach, to your kid.
Wow. That's good. That's good. No, it's just for me, like you talked about our kids are in a world where a lot of them are spending time online. They may not be living online, but they're spending time online. And so just as a parent to be able to partner and have that insight, for me, just provided another tool to be able to help raise and train my children and to get some insight into what the world may be trying to tell them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like sometimes your kid will bring up good questions to you, and sometimes they'll hold back. And it's not that they don't trust you as the dad, or in this case, I mean, or mom. It's that they want a bit of a judgment-free zone at all levels. Sometimes when they're curious and they're uncertain. And I'll give you a recent one. So my son was asking questions about like were there being a Christian, like were there men around when the dinosaurs were here? He started asking about like pre-Earth history, and he asked me about it, and I had a fairly long and hopefully not totally abstruse kind of explanation for him about all that. But he's 9. I mean, these are the ages they're going to be wrestling with different things they're learning from different sources, and it'll contradict sometimes, right? And it's you want to make sure they're basically having access to truth, but even more than just access to truth, you want them to start being able to discern the truth, right? To figure out, like, because we're not always going to be there. We're always there for them if they reach out and we know, but they're going to have a lot of points in life where we have to build these resilient kids that turn into resilient adults. And my hope is that what AngelQ does is it actually allows them to explore in ways they naturally want to, but without the risks that should never have been there, right? I mean, it's not like we're cutting off this internet they're entitled to. I mean, we're basically saying the red light district, there's no access point here, and so like that's how it always should have been. It was always almost a corruption that these things were built the way they were. I mean, it would be like, having a town where you took off every single alcohol for 18 and over or 21 and over sign off every single door, and they could roll in any bar they wanted. Like that's how they built the internet. And, that ends badly, and it's not just because, alcohol for young kids is bad. Of course it is. But think about the people that are in those environments and what they're actually exposing them to and what they might be dealing with. And that is not what we want our kids engaging with, because based on healthy development, they have to go through a different journey with their family and their peers to build up this resilience. And if you just throw them out in the wild, if you throw them in the middle of Times Square without a guide or anything, and they can wander anywhere, don't be surprised bad things happen. And I think that, we think the antithesis of that is have something safe where they can be curious, they can push, and be interesting and know that they can grow without judgment. And the parents are there alongside that journey to understand it and find ways to intervene and love the kid, through all the hard things. I mean, my 6-year-old, I haven't talked about this that much, but so he's neurodiverse. He's a little bit on the spectrum, and his name is actually Angel. And that's one reason I named this app that is one thing you find, and it's actually a real tragedy. These apps that are designed to be so addictive, they're 10x addictive on neurodiverse kids. Like these apps just abuse these kids, because what they do is they dysregulate them. They make them hooked. This dopamine hit thing I talked about earlier, when you take a kid that's kind of struggling with those kind of difficulties in terms of how their brain, grew up. And as we know, like this is getting super common, like especially among boys, like boys that are in the age of our boys. It's probably 10 times more likely that they had these kind of struggles than it was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It's amazing how much it's exploded. And they realize that they can hook these kids and they can't break away. Okay. And so I, decide, I could sit here and pound on how evil I think that is, but, I've got one, right? And so like, that's my boy. Like this is more personal, right? It's not just and so part of this is, how do you give kids that are like coming from all these different diverse places, how do you give them something that, does have their wellness in mind? and we have to build a business model that works that way. I mean, if we're saying no advertisement, we got to have people that support and actually use and pay for this, and it's transparent, right? It's like, this is how much it is a month to use, and this is because it cost us, X or Y to actually deliver it, and we're serving it for you. So I think that's the big stuff going on now, is that the kids, especially the neurodiverse ones, they need a place that's not just safe, but isn't trying to exacerbate, their weaknesses, that isn't trying to play to those weaknesses. And so mine is probably even more, of a user of AngelQ, because anytime he's got a question on something, and I'm like, I stumble, he's like, oh, let's ask Angel. It sort of becomes a cheat code for parents. Those of us that are using it, we know what we're talking about. Like they wanted to know, this was crazy, because it's like classic case of, as a dad, you kind of get this little aura of, most everything, but you really don't. And so the kids, when you can laugh through the fact when you don't know, so they're like, what's a number bigger than a Google? So Google, number with, one with 100 zeros behind it. And it's like the AngelQ said, well, a Googleplex. And that's like a one with a Google zeros behind it. And then, of course, they don't stop. Kids don't know what to stop. So they're like, well, what's bigger than that? It's like, who's going to win? And it's like came up with this thing called a Graham's number, which I'd done some math in undergrad. I didn't even know what this thing was. But basically, it's a number that is so big that it's longer to write than all the molecules in the universe. And so now, my little 9-year-old, 6-year-old, quizzing their peers about, what a Graham's number is. They got this little piece of knowledge they know, and they just can use it and love it. And I think that's what their childhood's supposed to be like. Finding new things that are positive things, that are interesting things, sharing with others, and the others sharing with them. And it builds up, a kind of community, a community of learning and curiosity. And I think what's happened is a lot of our young people, they face, and my kids haven't faced it fully that much yet because they're young enough, but the parents that have, 10, 11, 12-year-olds and going into high school, these engines of online communication have been they've all been amped up on comparison, right? How am I looking versus this other girl? How is my life versus this? And you know what? There's almost no sin that is as pernicious as envy, right? That just tears through things. And you've got a whole engine of envy and insecurity being used to hook our kids to spend more time because a few companies make billions off of it. And we should get mad about that. We should not settle for that. And that's kind of that's where we come in. And I know one of my frustrations is we're going as fast as we can. We're covering these younger kids, but man, we're going to have to build something for the teenagers too, because they got a whole nother fight, which is, growing up in an idea where their socialization is mostly virtual, which is just bizarre, right? But they hack the kids. And so the kids are wired now to think of socialization as being virtual first, not, oh, what would I meet up with, Harry or Sally, and then have this conversation, or did I just message them, I DM them somewhere, and it's probably 9 the latter and 1 the former. And so it's just so different now. And I mean, one thing that blew my mind is, I don't know. I'd love to get a kind of memory lane. Do y'all remember what it was like when you turned 16? Whether you lined up at the door of the DMV to make sure you got your license that day, right? Or maybe even you got that whole learner's permit thing going on, or you get some special consideration. You get to be one of the really cool 15-year-olds that just happens to get one of those, right? That was a rite of passage, and I think it probably was until about 10 years ago. The number of kids getting driver's licenses, when they hit 16 all the way up to when they go to college, is dropped dramatically. And the only explanation that I can give for it, and that some various social scientists that are far smarter than me, like Gene Twenge and others, give for it, is they've been pulled into such an online world, they don't have the drive to actually go out and have real connections and relationships. And that's super concerning, especially speaking we have a diversity of basically beliefs and views on all kinds of things in my team AngelQ. So what I'm going to say here, I'm going to say just in my personal capacity, speaking kind of as a believer, because I know you all bring, like on this podcast, you dig into these areas of like faith and how we're supposed to live in this life. There's something deeply wrong and deeply missing when we don't have embodied relationships. We talked about the oxytocin earlier, like the physical thing that we're wired in by design to have that possible bonding with people. If we have a whole generation that's being conditioned to not engage with people as people, they're basically engaging in the virtual world with people as things, as ends to be used, right? And it's almost like abuse. Like when somebody takes advantage of somebody else, often there's a history of where they were abused themselves, right? Like there's a lot of correlation in that. And so what's interesting is I think there's going to be a similar correlation when you have people that are brought up to live on the other side of screens as the primary way they interact. I think the dehumanizing like effect that's implied in that lives on in all the ways they treat people. I think empathy gets to be super hard, and, that's key. I mean, part of like at the root, of all love is empathy. It's the putting yourself, behind somebody else. And that starts with you viewing someone as as an end in themselves, that they're worthy, that they have human dignity, because they were created in the image of God. And like, when you think about what we've substituted, how is any of that going to break through? Right. In fact, we probably created one of the only systems that take the truth of how people are, like embodied and in relationships, and really, kind of obfuscate that truth by changing the way they interact and making it so ubiquitous that people forget that, what's great is when I've got friends that'll come help me move a couch, not when I've got 100 likes on Instagram and none of them would show up for me if I needed them. Right. And so like, that's the difference. And like I said, I don't necessarily think when I say I want to turn that back, I wish we had never come here. I want it to go to a better place. The better place probably looks a little more like it was than it is today. And it'll be a little different because there'll be all this magic with AI where it can help them and be present. And I just think the magic is one way out of the hole. And that's the thing I'm hoping is, and we're trying to build thoughtfully, is that if it becomes super easy for computers to do all this stuff, to go find stuff online for you, why in the world should you use your time up that way? Right. And if we can, like I said, make it a universe where 14-year-olds see other 14-year-olds looking down their phone and they're like, what's wrong with you? Like, I mean, I'm over here and like, do you have like software that's 10 years old or something? Because nobody does that anymore. Like, that's the world I think we can still get to. But it's a world that's going to be fought tooth and nail by some companies. I'll just name one, like Meta, for instance. I mean, there's no way out of the model they've chosen. There's an ethical compromise at the heart of their business that I don't see how they can escape. Okay, Google, for its issues, there probably is a way out. They can be a supplier of technology. They can charge people for that. They can charge companies and they can charge people, and they could probably have an amazing business. It's just going to be hard transitioning. Meta is fundamentally a digital narcotics company. So I don't know how it gets out. I don't know how Snap gets out. I don't know how these other guys all get out. It's like asking Pablo Escobar, hey, do you want to go sell sugar instead? And so, yeah, I mean, that's what we got. And so I think we're going to see some companies, I hope, that dramatically diminish in value or get totally replaced. And we'll have others that maybe pivot. You can see like Microsoft and a couple of others that are trying to find a line down this and trying not to go down the same dark paths. What's so funny is like people talk about gaming stuff. The gaming companies, most of these had great age verification and protections on kids going back like 10, 15 years, things that could have been put into Instagram on day one, and we wouldn't have had 98% of this total garbage on it in terms of the harms to kids. Like, it was a choice not to. It was widely known. In fact, it was weird that when you got an Xbox taking a credit card to be able to validate a kid getting online, right? That's what it took. Okay, kids signed up to be able to do gaming and multiplayer gaming online, going back to like 2011 with whatever basic kind of connection they had back then. Like, they had to give a credit card. Parent had to give a credit card. 16, 17-year-olds or even 13 years, they're not having a credit card. Company won't give it to them, right? Probably be something really extraordinary. So that was almost like a bulletproof way to know this is a minor and this is the adult, and the adult's signing off for the minor. Nothing like that was done for these other systems. And when you go strip away why, I'm going to get into a little bit of the soapbox moment, but like when you strip away why, the reason is us as adults, we can't spend 6 or 8 hours on a screen a day. I mean, we could do it part of our work and all, but we can't be sitting there like doom scrolling for 4 or 5 or 6 hours. We just literally can't get away with it. We got family, we got work to do, we got money to bring in, we got stuff to deal with. Only a tiny fraction of adults can do that, but a lot of kids can. And so what they figured out was that they get these under 18 kids on there, these ones even earlier, like, 10, 11, 12, ones that legally never should have been on. They're worth probably 3 to 4 times what an adult's worth. Okay. It's the same ads, same that way they're counting. So when you realize, you like, why did they do this? Like, why? It is so straightforward to fix it. If once you get away from the idea that, they can't fix it, it's just too hard. Well, that's never been true. So why do they not put friction in? Well, it's because if they could get enough kids addicted on it, they would be worth 4 times the adult in terms of time spent because they had the time to waste. I mean, they really didn't. What they did is they traded, being good at athletics. They traded having time with friends. They traded, volunteering with their church. They traded learning a new language. They traded all this other stuff for that virtual drug. And like that, once you put that math together, like, okay, so there's 20 million kids or 30 million kids that are illegally on these apps, or 40 million, but that's the equivalent of 120 million adults. There's the math. That's why they haven't fixed it, because you do the math on that and you're talking about costing them tens of billions of dollars if they actually protect the kids versus what they have today. And tens of billions of dollars ends up translating with modern types of earnings calculations to probably, I don't know, $500 billion of market cap. And so these companies, they're basically eating up our kids because it's probably made them $500 billion to $1 trillion richer. And it's that simple. Like, I mean, if someone wants to compete and give me another explanation, I am all ears for it. But having been in the trenches in this, because one thing I spent time on in addition to trying to build a tool is I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., been a lot of time trying to fight for like better safety regulation, because I don't think a single tool can fix all this. I mean, I love what we're building. Sam, I'm so excited that you've had the great experience with this. Even though it's our 1.0, it's like so little of what we hope to finally have. But it's arrogant to think that a company can just do all this. I mean, maybe with God, all things are possible, and we'll see. But I really think it's a societal problem, and that means our political leaders have to step up and say, you know what? When do we give digital narcotic companies basically full immunity on everything they're doing, which is basically where they live today? Like, there's very little that's broken with the courts despite all the harms. Now, I think that might be changing the next year. There's some stuff pending with the attorney generals and others. We'll see, just like with tobacco, eventually that reckoning came. But right now, we're in that pre-tobacco phase, or right in the heart of the tobacco phase. We're going to find out if our society's going to step up and change it. And that's the thing. It's my mission. It's my calling right now. And I'll be on it till we deal with it.
Tim, one more thing from me. We're talking about addiction today, right? But not drugs and not alcohol. We're talking about dopamine, right? And clicks and likes. And I read a recent Newsweek article on your Angel AI product, and it said, in quote, if social media is already a digital heroin for our youth, new and enhanced AI will become their fentanyl. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because, again, I have a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I'm living through this right now. And I think as a parent, especially as you get to the teenage years, you feel the pressure of, the kids that my daughter's going to school with, they all have Snap, they all have Instagram, they all have TikTok. And Dad, why are you holding that against me? And even Dad, when I turn 13 for my 13th birthday, would you allow me to get Snapchat? And so obviously there's a huge problem, and you're working on the solution. I don't know if the solution is getting all the kids flip phones. I wish that could solve a lot of issues if they all were, carrying around flip phones. But I have a ton of respect for the mission that you're on. And I guess the question I had for you right now, if a parent wanted to go to the App Store on an iPhone, Is the Angel product already out there where you can purchase that?
Yeah, AngelQ is live on the App Store. For some reason, so if you search literally AngelQ, you're going to find it. You may get it auto-correcting to Angela, and there's like 4 things that are called Angela on the App Store. We've noticed this is a funny thing, but hopefully as we get more and more people, it's just going to go straight to it. So yes, it's there. It's a great tool for 5 to 12-year-olds. We do have some older kids, 13, 14, that are on it, love the answers and so forth. Picking up what you said though, and your point, Cliff, like I think for parents that are getting that conversation with their kid, 13, they want to be on Snapchat or something else. I mean, really, I fully endorse sort of some of the ideas that Jonathan Haidt has put out, like an anxious generation, and one of those is no social media till 16. Like I think that, and even then, I mean, I'm almost wondering, like, is it really needed? I mean, it's one of those things where the reason is you're literally throwing them into Times Square without a guide. And it isn't just even that simple. There are people lurking, knowing they're coming. Like if you got a 13-year-old girl growing on Snapchat, she's going to get essentially digitally sexually assaulted multiple times within the first year she's on it. I just guarantee you. She's going to get people sending her stuff, random people, because they haven't put these protections up. They have some sort of each Instagram teens now this product, and Snap, they try to add some things in the last year or two because Congress was coming down once they finally were forced to try to do something. But even in the last, I think week and a half, there was I'll send a story offline, maybe if you want to include it with the notes on the podcast, but like there were some kids that, basically did a deep dive. These are like college kids. So they're Gen Zers who have grown up with all this stuff happen to them. And they run 2 groups. One's called Design It For Us, and the other's called the Young People's Alliance. And they've been on Capitol Hill, arguing for safety standards for these apps because of what's happened to their generation. And they went and tested Instagram teens, and they were getting just unbelievable stuff still coming straight through. It's like they don't want the safety stuff to work, no matter what they keep telling people. And given the math I gave you earlier, probably why they may not really want it to work. Like they're going to have to be forced to do it. So if that's the environment, like is the disapproval of your child worth the risk to your child? I think that's the hard question, and it's hard as a parent. Is taking your kid's disapproval is one of the hardest things as a dad you can do. At the same time, it's absolutely one of the most important things you ever do as a dad is take on your kid's disapproval, because you have great intent for them, and you have years and years of life lessons. And when you second guess yourself on it, I mean, there'll be occasionally the thing where they're right about something as they get older and they get their own means, but they're still going to be wrong most of the time. And we're here to be true to ourselves and protect them. We're not here to be their we're their dad, and we're not their buddy, like just making them happy with stuff. Like we're here to give them a fruitful life and protect them along the way. And even more fully, teach them how to get wisdom to protect themselves, because we won't always be there. And so that's what I'd say. So I definitely, AngelQ's in the App Store. People can go pull it down. I think it'll do some great things for your family. It's not a replacement for like every addictive app by design, but it is a way that you can leave YouTube and Google behind and have your kid do some great stuff in a way that's thoughtfully done and affirmative, and learn about them in the process. All that's the promises I can say we're going to keep. But beyond that, when you're dealing with older kids, like, do not be bullied by your bullies, maybe the wrong word, but like not be moved by this pressure on your child. Your kid is not going to do something horrible to themselves because they do not have Snap or WhatsApp or whatever, or any of the Meta products or Instagram or TikTok. Like, they're not going to do that. But if they go on it because we let them on it, you might end up with a Gavin Guffey. I don't know if you know the situation or know that name, but there's a wonderful human being named Brandon Guffey. He's a state representative in South Carolina. And he had protections like in his house, like on his devices, like, and they had certain standards. And he had a 17-year-old boy who was on Instagram. And they were going for family vacation, They're about to go to family vacation the next day. And 11 o'clock at night or midnight or so, his son Gavin is on Instagram, and some attractive girl starts really flirting with him, right? And starts chatting, with him, and then eventually escalates it over an hour or two online because this stuff has no friction. It's going full of fast. And sends some pictures, and then asks him for it. And then as soon as he sends it along at like 1 a.m. in the morning or 12:30, which is another estimate, it's like there really is no good use of digital technology, like after probably after 8 o'clock, like unless you can lock down to just things that help their schooling. Okay. And that might be possible, but it's pretty hard. Like it ain't worth it. There's just nothing. My wife has a phrase like nothing good happens after dark on that kind of stuff. So, this is how the story ends. The supposed girl immediately flips on him and starts blackmailing him and says they're going to send this picture out to all the friends and the rest of it, and just berates him and tears in him for like an hour or so. It turns out it's actually a Nigerian gang that were called the Yahoo Boys, and they did this to all kinds of kids. And Gavin, in despair, probably lived a pretty solid citizen life as a teenager in his high school engagement, had a certain kind of reputation. He killed himself, and so his dad had to go wake up to that, and then this is how sick these people are. They actually contacted him, the dad, and the younger brother, and tried to blackmail them too, after the older brother had killed himself. And it was such a severe thing, they actually passed a law in South Carolina called Gavin's Law. I've walked the halls of Congress with Brandon Guffey. Like I say, he's a good, decent human being who's taken that pain. I mean, we're parents. Like, there's nothing worse. Our nightmare, right, is losing one of our kids. Like everything else, it's like you could take anything from me, but not that, right? And this is why the story with Abraham and Isaac is so important, right? Is there's nothing so greater than the love you've got for your kid, and losing that is the hardest thing to deal with in life. So any parent that has had that happen and they find the courage to go on the march with it, take that pain, have to relive it. And I've met tons of those parents. We need to listen to them, and not just with what they say we should do to protect kids. We need to listen to them and what they're also saying, which is it really wasn't worth it to have actually given my kid access to that. And I think so. I just leave that stick with it. You've got some great listeners on here, and everybody's got their opinion with this, but I'm going to say there's a huge virtue in just staying strong and saying no to it. I'm hopeful in the next 2 to 3 years or so, we'll have alternatives where they'll end up, for the younger kids, like it just won't be as appealing. It won't be as interesting. There won't be an Instagram childhood. That's what I hope can happen. But that's hope right now. That's not a reality. The reality of today, if your kid's facing it, is, don't send them to the wolves.
Wow. Well, Tim, thank you so much for not just joining the podcast or the conversation, but joining the fight to not just protect your children, but protect so many children who are in the digital space now. We are grateful for your time, for your insight, for the last, you said, talk about 3 decades of fighting. I think that the term people called you was like the digital police for a while before you started.
RoboCop. I had to wear the costume that year too, by the way. So yeah.
RoboCop.
That was my Halloween outfit after that. My kids had so much fun with it. So
I love it. We're so grateful for you, for your doing and building at AngelQ, Angel AI, and even the stories you shared about your son, Angel, and also your 9-year-old son as well. For anyone who wants to learn more about Tim, there's information about Angel online, but also go to sammacho.com. You'll be able to get all the info about this podcast and so many more, and so much more of what Tim and his team are doing. So on behalf of me, Sam Macho, Clif Marshall, Tim Estes, we say thank you. We'll see you next time.